July 20th, 1944, Rassenburg, East Prussia, a military compound deep in German territory, Hitler's field headquarters, a fortress protected by guards, perimeter security, fortified positions, a staff meeting. Hitler and his generals gathered in a wooden conference barrack, maps spread across tables discussing the deteriorating military situation, the Allies advancing from the west, the Soviets advancing from the east, Germany's empire collapsing. In a briefcase beneath one of the tables sits a bomb, a pound of plastic explosives, a pencil detonator, a mechanism that will release acid, dissolving a wire, allowing a firing pin to strike a detonator. In 10 minutes, perhaps less. The briefcase belongs to Colonel Klaus von Stauffenberg, a German officer, a man who has decided that the only way to save Germany, the only way to stop the horror, is to kill Adolf Hitler. He's about to trigger the device. At this moment, multiple German conspirators are positioned across in Berlin, waiting for a signal, waiting to launch Operation Valkyrie, a coup d'etat designed to overthrow Hitler's government, to negotiate peace with the Allies, to stop the war. Everything depends on what happens in the next few minutes. Everything depends on whether Hitler dies in that barrack. I'm Keith Conrad, and this is Sidequests. Today, July 20th, Operation Valkyrie, the plot to kill Hitler. How German military officers, judges, clergy, and politicians, people who had largely supported the Nazi regime, came to believe that assassinating their leader was the only moral choice. How they organized an assassination that came remarkably close to succeeding, and what it tells us about resistance under tyranny. To understand the July 20th plot, you have to understand something remarkable. Most of the conspirators were not resistors from the beginning. They were men who supported German rearmament, men who believed in strong national government, men who in the 1930s saw some aspects of Nazi ideology as legitimate expressions of German nationalism. They were not brave resistors standing apart from the regime from day one. They were men, gradually, agonizingly, coming to realize that they had supported something monstrous. The realization came slowly, then faster, then inescapably as the war dragged on, as the scope of Nazi atrocities became clearer, as German soldiers returned with stories of massacre and genocide, as the Holocaust proceeded systematically in the East. By 1943-1944, some German officers understood what Nazi Germany had become, understood that the regime was committing crimes against humanity on a scale almost incomprehensible. And they faced a choice: do nothing and be complicit in ongoing atrocity, do something and risk death. The central figure in the July 20th plot is Klaus von Stauffenberg. Born in 1907 into a Swabian aristocratic family, educated, cultured, idealistic, he joined the German army as an officer, a professional soldier committed to duty, to service, to honor. In the 1930s, he was not a Nazi resistor. He served the regime. He believed in German strength. He believed the Reich would restore German pride, but the war changed him. In 1943, serving as a staff officer in North Africa, Stauffenberg's vehicle was attacked by Allied aircraft. He was severely wounded, lost his left eye, lost his right hand, seriously injured in one arm. He was transported back to Germany, slowly recovered. But his career as a field officer was over. The injuries were devastating, but they also gave him something: distance, recovery time, opportunity to think, to reflect, to reckon with what he had become part of. While recovering, Stauffenberg began meeting with other German officers, men with similar doubts, similar moral anguish, similar conviction that something had to be done. By 1943, Stauffenberg had joined the resistance. Not the passive resistance of passive dissent, but active, dangerous, assassination-focused resistance. He became convinced that Hitler had to die. How do you kill someone who is obsessively guarded? Someone surrounded by loyal SS officers? Someone who rarely appears in public? Stauffenberg had an idea. As a high-ranking staff officer, he had access to Hitler's headquarters, had access to conferences, had access to proximity, and he had access to explosives, military explosives. He captured French explosives, the means to make a bomb. The plan began to form. Operation Valkyrie was the code name for a military contingency plan, a protocol that allowed military commanders to mobilize emergency forces in case of civil unrest. The conspirators planned to use Valkyrie, to trigger it, to mobilize military forces across Germany, to use that mobilization to seize control to arrest Nazi officials to shut down the regime, but first Hitler had to die. The assassination would be the trigger. Hitler's death would create a crisis. The military would mobilize under Valkyrie. In the chaos, the conspirators could seize power. If it worked, Germany's military leadership would control the country. They could negotiate peace with the Allies. They could stop the war. They could try to prevent further atrocities. It was an audacious plan. It required perfect coordination, perfect timing, perfect luck. Stauffenberg decided he would plant the bomb. He would be in the meeting with Hitler. He would place the briefcase under the table. He would activate the detonator. Then, in the confusion after the explosion, he would escape. Other conspirators were positioned in Berlin, waiting for the signal, waiting to launch Valkyrie, waiting to seize the government. Everything was ready. Everything depended on a single moment, a single bomb, a single act of courage and desperation. Morning, Rastenburg, Hitler's headquarters. Stauffenberg arrives for the scheduled staff conference. He's carrying a briefcase. Inside, explosives, a detonator, everything needed to kill the Fuhrer. The briefcase is checked. Security protocols, but the officers checking it don't look inside. They trust Stauffenberg. He's beyond suspicion. Conference begins. Hitler enters the barrack. General staff officers take their positions. Maps are spread. Stauffenberg, standing near the table, makes his move. He activates the detonator, a pencil filled with acid. The acid slowly dissolves a wire. In 10 minutes, the wire breaks. A firing pin strikes. The explosives detonate. Then Stauffenberg makes an excuse. He leaves the barrack. He leaves the building. He positions himself outside, waiting for the explosion. Minutes pass, 5 minutes. The bomb should have detonated, should be detonating. Then an explosion, a blast, smoke, flames shooting from the barrack. Stauffenberg is certain the explosion was massive. No one could have survived. He immediately tries to contact Berlin, tries to activate Valkyrie, tries to tell the conspirators that Hitler is dead, that the moment has come, that they need to seize power, but something is wrong. Communications are chaotic. Unclear, no confirmation of Valkyrie activation, and then Stauffenberg's worst fears confirmed. A radio message, a report. Hitler survived the explosion, badly injured, possibly dying, but initially alive. Later, investigators would determine what happened. The bomb was powerful, properly designed. The explosives were top quality. But the conference had been moved, originally scheduled to take place in a reinforced concrete bunker. The bomb was designed for that bunker. The concrete would have contained the blast, intensified the explosion, made survival nearly impossible. But that day, because of pleasant weather, Hitler decided to hold the conference in the wooden barrack instead. The wooden structure allowed the blast to dissipate, allowed the shockwave to escape through the open walls. And instead of concentrating the explosive force, the wooden building dispersed it. In the bunker, everyone in the room would have died. In the barrack, Hitler was wounded, his trousers were burned, his hearing was damaged, but he lived. Stauffenberg didn't know this initially. He was outside. He heard the explosion. He was convinced it was successful, so he proceeded with the plan. Tried to activate Valkyrie, tried to seize the government, but without confirmation that Hitler was dead, without immediate success, the conspiracy began to unravel. In Berlin, the conspirators were waiting for confirmation, waiting for word that the coup should proceed, waiting for clear signal that Hitler was dead. The signal never came. Communications remained confused, contradictory reports, uncertainty. Meanwhile, Nazi loyalists, officers who hadn't been part of the conspiracy, were also mobilizing. They heard about an assassination attempt. They heard about military units moving. They suspected a coup. Without confirmation that Hitler was dead, without clear military advantage, they had incentive to resist. Hours passed, the moment of advantage slipped away. By evening, it became clear the coup had failed. The conspirators in Berlin were arrested, shot, hunted. Stauffenberg, realizing the plot was lost, made no attempt to escape. He accepted arrest. That night, in the courtyard of the Bendler Block building in Berlin, Stauffenberg was executed by firing squad. His last words reportedly, "Long live sacred Germany." What followed was terror. Hitler, having survived the assassination attempt, was enraged and fearful. The conspiracy had penetrated deeply into the military, deeply into the civil government, deeply into the judiciary, into the clergy. How many were involved? How many others had been planning similar attempts? Hitler ordered a purge, an investigation, arrests, interrogations, executions. Over the following weeks and months, hundreds of people were arrested, hundreds were executed. some by firing squads, some by hanging, some by more cruel methods. Stauffenberg's co-conspirators were hunted down, found, arrested, tried, executed. Karl Goerdeler was captured, tried, and hanged. Helmut James von Moltke was captured and tried and hanged. Peter York was arrested and executed. Hundreds of others, military officers, judges, clergy, civil servants, were killed for their involvement or suspected involvement in the plot. It was a bloodbath, a purge that decimated the German resistance. The July 20th plot failed for multiple reasons. Tactically, the bomb didn't kill Hitler. The wooden barrack dispersed the blast. Logistically, communications broke down. The conspirators in Berlin didn't get clear confirmation that Hitler was dead. Uncertainty paralyzed action. Strategically, the conspirators counted on Operation Valkyrie being implemented quickly, on military obedience to their orders. But without confirmed success, without clear evidence that Hitler was dead, military units hesitated, Nazi loyalists resisted. The moment of advantage vanished. Politically, many German officers and officials weren't part of the conspiracy. Many were genuinely loyal to Hitler. Many believed in continuing the fight. Without a coup that was clearly succeeding, they mobilized against it. Practically, the conspirators were isolated. They couldn't coordinate perfectly. They couldn't control all variables. In the chaos of war and the complexity of a military coup, too many things depended on luck. But more fundamentally, they were trying to overthrow a totalitarian regime from within. A regime that had penetrated every level of society. A regime with secret police, with informants, with ruthless capacity to eliminate threats. The wonder is not that the plot failed. The wonder is that it was attempted at all. The July 20th conspirators faced a profound moral question. In a regime committing atrocities on a massive scale, is assassination morally justified? Is killing the leader an acceptable response to genocide? Many of the conspirators were Christian. They wrestled with religious teaching about the sanctity of life, about the prohibition against murder. Dietrich Bonhoeffer wrote extensively about this. He concluded that in extreme circumstances, when a regime is committing atrocities that dwarf any murder the resistance might commit, then yes, assassination could be morally justified. It wasn't an easy conclusion, it wasn't a comfortable one. But Bonhoeffer and others like him decided that their faith demanded resistance, demanded that they act to stop evil, even if acting meant committing acts they would normally consider immoral. This remains one of the profound moral questions of World War II, not just for historians, but for anyone thinking about resistance and moral obligation. At what point does the immorality of assassination become less important than the immorality of allowing atrocities to continue? The conspirators answered, that point had been reached. The July 20th plot failed. Hitler survived. The conspirators died, but the plot had consequences. It proved that resistance to the Nazi regime existed, that even within the military, within the institutions closest to Hitler, people were willing to resist. It provided a moral precedent, proof that you could oppose Hitler and the Nazi regime, that you could resist. For Germans after the war, looking back at 12 years of Nazi rule, the July 20th conspirators represented moral redemption. They represented Germans who had said no, who had chosen conscience over obedience. They became symbols of the other Germany, the Germany that opposed Hitler, the Germany that valued human life and morality over regime loyalty. Nearly 80 years after July 20th, the conspirators are honored in Germany. Memorials mark the locations where they died, street names commemorate them, schools bear their names. In Berlin, the Bendler Block, the building where Stauffenberg was executed, is now a memorial to the resistance. Every year on July 20th, commemorations are held. Germans remember the men and women who resisted. The question, why did so few Germans resist, has a partial answer in the July 20th conspirators. They did resist. They resisted at the highest levels. They resisted at the cost of their lives. That resistance matters. Not because it succeeded, it didn't, but because it happened. Because it demonstrated that even under totalitarianism, resistance was possible. Moral choice was possible. But there's another layer to this story, a moral complexity that's often overlooked. Many of the July 20th conspirators had supported the Nazi regime in its early years, had benefited from it, had served it loyally. Klaus von Stauffenberg, for example, initially supported German rearmament, believed in the restoration of German power. He was not a resistor from 1933. He became a resistor gradually as he understood what the regime was doing. This raises uncomfortable questions. Were the conspirators heroes? Yes. They chose conscience, they chose resistance, they died for it. But were they also complicit in the regime's earlier actions? Yes, they had served it, supported it, benefited from it. This complexity doesn't negate their heroism, but it complicates it. It reminds us that moral clarity is often a luxury available only in retrospect. And in the moment, in the 1930s, resistance seemed less obvious. The regime seemed to be achieving positive things: economic recovery, national strength, restoration of pride. The atrocities, particularly the Holocaust, were hidden from many people. By 1943, the atrocities were known, the moral clarity came, and then resistance became possible. But the question remains, why did it take so long? Why did it require millions of deaths before German officers decided to act? There's no comfortable answer to that question. Operation Valkyrie has inspired cultural memory. Films have been made, books have been written. The plot has entered popular imagination, partly because it's dramatic, an assassination plot, a coup attempt, the climactic moment of resistance, but also because it raises genuine questions about resistance, morality, and what people owe to their conscience. The July 20th conspirators didn't succeed militarily. They didn't overthrow Hitler. They didn't stop the Holocaust. They didn't end the war, but they tried. They took action. They refused to be passive. In a regime built on obedience, on hierarchical authority, on the suppression of individual conscience, then that act of refusal matters. Let's return to the moment of execution. Stauffenberg, bent blindfolded, facing the firing squad. He's thinking of Germany, of what Germany could be after the war, of the moral principle that he was acting on. The firing squad executes. Stauffenberg dies. He doesn't live to see Germany defeated, the regime destroyed, the regime's atrocities revealed. He doesn't live to see the liberation of concentration camps, the rescue of survivors, the beginning of reckoning with what the Nazis did. He dies believing the attempt failed, believing the regime will continue, believing his sacrifice was in vain. He doesn't know that history will remember him as a hero, that his name will be honored, that his moral choice will be celebrated. He dies in failure, but he dies having chosen correctly. July 20th, 1944, a bomb beneath a conference table, an explosion that almost changed history. If the bomb had detonated in the bunker, if Hitler had died, if Valkyrie had succeeded, if the conspirators had seized power, the war might have ended months or even a year earlier. Millions of lives might have been saved. The Holocaust might have been shortened. History might have turned on a different axis. But the bomb detonated in a wooden barrack. Hitler survived. The coup failed. The conspirators died. And yet the attempt matters, not because it succeeded, but because it happened. Because even under totalitarianism, even facing absolute power, even at the cost of their lives, German military officers chose to act, chose to resist, chose moral conscience over obedience. 80 years later, we honor them not because they won, but because they tried. And in trying, in refusing to accept complicity, in refusing to remain passive, in choosing action even when success seemed impossible, they affirmed a principle that transcends military victory or political success. They affirmed that even under tyranny, moral choice is possible, and that's worth remembering.